Ihr Lieben, die Gesellschaft verändert sich fast täglich, ganze Unternehmen verändern sich und auch kulturelle Veränderungen spielen eine große Rolle, wenn es darum geht, erfolgreiche Teams zu bilden. Eine Frau, die sich mit diesen Veränderungen, mit diesen Fragen beschäftigt und das auf sehr beeindruckende Weise, die haben wir jetzt zu Gast und wird an dieser Stelle musikalisch vorgestellt. Bitteschön.
Es geht um Menschen und Kultur, es ist Anthropologie, überall um uns herum eine Wissenschaft für die Leute noch genauer betrachten als die meisten. In dieser Disziplin gibt es Unfassbares zu leisten, gerade in dieser Zeit. Eine Frau hat es drauf, Jitske Kramer, digitaler Applaus. Jetzt bitte.
Hi, I'm an anthropologist. And what anthropologists do, they try to understand how people shape cultures and how cultures shape people. And that's a very, very relevant topic. So what I do, I travel the world. I travel the world to understand how do people shape those cultures. And you could say that nothing has meaning of itself. We have to create the meaning together. It's like every tribe, every group all across the globe, they have the same type of universal questions, universal issues, like how to be effective, how to get to success, how to have good leadership, how to improve our feedback. It's universal. And it's almost like those cultures are unique answers to universal questions. What I like to do is to travel to understand the different answers to those universal questions. And I like to share some of my insights with you. So 2 years ago, I went to Togo because I was invited by a voodoo priest. And if I say voodoo, most people step back and say, whoa, that's the black magic with the dolls and the needles. But that's exactly why I went there, because I met a voodoo priest who said, well, they have such a bad image. It's not our religion. Those are my management development programs. And that's where I met Chabasi. And Chabasi is voodoo priest, and he's around 90 years old. And I had a long conversation with him, and I asked him, if I talk with leaders in Europe, what should I tell them? What are the lessons you like to bring to those leaders? And he taught me many, and I just want to share one with you. He said, well, if you talk with them, just say them that I wonder that in Europe people don't know where they're from anymore. You can count one generation back, maybe two, your grandparents, but then you're lost. And he said, but if you don't know where you're from, how do you know where to go? And I think that's a vital lesson, and especially in those COVID days where we are thrown back to our essentials and where we really want to see, okay, where are we from so we can build the future. I travel the world to understand how people shape cultures. And the issue is that we don't have to travel very far, as you can see. And now you can say, well, this is just the Hollander. But you must say that even you do funny stuff. And that's why we get to the definition of what anthropology is. And that is, anthropology makes the familiar strange and the strange familiar. And I love those sentences. Anthropology makes the familiar strange. Everything which is familiar to you, when you take a closer look, it's pretty strange what you're doing. And everything you feel is very strange, but you take a closer look, it becomes familiar. And if you look at the world like this, you can be in a constant state of slight to strong confusion. And I like to spread confusion. So please travel with me to understand how people build strong social groups which are safe for diversity and ready for change, because that's my quest. How do we build strong tribes? Because a social group, a different word for that is a tribe. And a tribe is a community of people, is an organization, a department, a team. And this tribe wants to be strong. So how do we build strong cultures, strong tribes? Well, we tend to think that if we optimize each individual, we give them a great skill level, then they get very strong. And yes, it works. But if the mutual relationships are not as strong, the tribe is not as strong as it could be. If I enter a village and I notice that one part of the village is not talking to the other, it's not as strong as it could be. If I enter a village and I notice that the people in the village are not actually talking with the chiefs, it's not as strong as it could be. And the same counts for organizations. If I enter an organization and one department is not talking to the other, so we have this silo thing going on, and the board of directors doesn't know what's going on the shop floor, a tribe is not as strong as it could be. And then we know that the chances that we're all thinking the same thing at this very moment are zero. So we know that we're different. And we know that within one tribe, there will be different interests. It's like a city. Every city has different departments, different areas, and they're all different, but together there's this one city. They're Hamburg and not Berlin. That's how it works. And it's the same for organizations. You have one culture, but within that we have differences. And strong tribes know how to deal with the differences. Strong tribes save for diversity and therefore ready for any change. And my quest is, how do people do that? Well, let me share with you a couple of my thoughts. So how does it work with culture and change? And I'll give you the management summary of anthropology. So we'll go fast. So be with me. People shape cultures and cultures shape people. That's how it is, because nothing has meaning of itself. Everything just is. Every behavior is. But we can't live like that. So we have to define, okay, this is good and this is bad. This is right and this is wrong. And this is normal and this is not. And that's how it works. So there can be this group. Let's assume there's, a group here in this part of the world. And they decide they have these universal questions, how to deal with leaders. And they decide for whatever reason that, a good leader is a very, visible leader, is very strong, and he puts his ideas into the tribe and they will follow. If that's the case, you think that's very valuable, then you have behavior which fits that value. So you have the values and the norms. And after that, you start building the tribe in terms of procedures and how you build your location, and that usually fitting what you feel is important and what type of behavior. So if you feel it's valuable that the leader is visible and takes the decisions and everyone follows, then you don't call the leader all the time. You give an assistant, and when you start building the building, you give the leader their own space with their own elevators so they don't have to go through the hassle of all the people all the time. Well, there can be a different tribe somewhere else, like in a different department of the organization, different country, and they also have the question, what is good leadership? And let's assume this tribe decides, well, what we value is leaders who are not too visible. They're more facilitating the process. They're more in the back. And then if we have behaviors, you can call them all the time because they want to know what's going on. And if you start building the building, you don't give them their own office space somewhere far away. You just make sure that they're part of the tribe, because then they can facilitate every decision. People shape cultures and cultures shape people. That's what we do. And we do that in office spaces too. We can't do without. It's like gravity. You can't say, well, today I don't feel like it. It's still there. Because we have to have those frames, the frames of what's good and bad, and true and false, and what's beautiful and ugly. The question is, who can decide that? Who can define the norm? Who can decide what's right and wrong? And if those two people, those two groups, if they meet each other, what will happen? Usually something happens like, wait, you got it wrong. You got the wrong answer to this universal question. Well, it would be much more effective if they would say, wow, that's great. You started off with the same type of question and you just found a different answer. That's amazing. And then we would start creating a culture together. But somehow it's difficult, because if nothing has meaning of itself, we can't live like that. So if we start creating the world, we manifest what we think is important in the world around us. We manifest it, we solidify cultures in buildings and procedures and systems. And that's why sometimes it's hard to change it. But we can change it any day. We can decide something else is important and then build our cultures along those basic assumptions. Now, what is vital then is to understand the process. How do people shape those cultures? Because then you know what to focus on as a leader, as a teammate. You know what to do. Well, then we see that the vital processes in culture shaping are interaction and decision making. Because if people don't meet, nothing will happen. There's two groups, they never meet, nothing will happen. As soon as they start meeting each other and they interact, they have a discussion about what is good and bad, right and wrong. Strong tribes, safe for diversity, ready for change. So you're focusing on good relationships, interaction. The question then is, who can join which table? Who can join which interaction? And that's a power question. And therefore, culture has everything to do with power. Because it's all about who can define the norm, who can decide this is right and this is wrong. And therefore, people shape cultures through interaction and decision making. And once we got that, we got a storyline. And the storyline is great and it feels good. Because without it, we don't know what to do. We've got our routines, and that's why we have management development courses where we define, okay, this is where we go, this is what we do, and then we always know that there is always someone with a different view. Always. That's the given. Diversity is not the odd one out. The fact is we're all different. Strong tribes know how to deal with diversity, and that's an inclusion issue. And this little bird you see here hanging upside down, I call that bird Harry. But you can call it Harriet, or Fatima, Mo, Piotr, Dimitri, I don't care. And what do we say to Harry? Usually we say something like, what's up? Why? Are you bad or something? We make jokes. We say, sit up straight, do like the others. But we should say, whoa, man. What is it that you see? That's creative, because then we can deal with the change. Because every change, every innovation starts with someone saying, we could also. So strong tribes know how to deal with diversity. Actually, they ask for different views. Does anyone has a different view? And who recognizes that a little bit? Make it safe for diversity. So that's basically how people shape cultures. You know, you can't do without, and it's the key in every organization. And how to create that. So how can we change a culture which is not what we want? So if we want to change it in a different way, culture change programs, and then some people say, well, that's too hard. Leave it. Or some people even say, it's too hard, let's decide we don't have anything like culture. Or we change the systems and maybe in page 25 of the program we mention something like culture. But the systems are culture, the procedures are culture. If we change the buildings, you change the culture. It's a complex system. So how do cultures change? Well, the good news is that they change anyhow, even if you don't do anything. Because cultures change constantly through every micro decision we make. People shape cultures through interaction and decision making. And every micro decision you take, you decide whether or not you continue the culture like you did, or you change it. If you go on time to the meeting or not. If you give the feedback or not. If you decide something as a leader or facilitate others to do so or not. Cultures change through every micro decision. Now then the question can be, yeah, but what can we do to jumpstart that? To not wait for the process to unfold, but to do something. Well, then we have something which we call rituals. Where you say, okay, now is the kickoff session, and now we change the culture. And the funny thing is, we work to the kickoff, and I'm sure you've been at those meetings. And then you have the new corporate values, and there's a whole program. You've got mouse mats and posters. Ta-da! And nothing happens, because it doesn't work like that. You announce it, but cultures don't change in 2 steps. They don't go from A to B, from Ist to Sol. They go from what we have to a separation, and then on a period of nothing, of the in-between, and then we reintegrate to the new normal. And that period of in-between, anthropologists call it liminal space. Liminal space. It's betwixt and between. It's the moment where we decide that what was no longer is. And that what will be, we don't know yet how exactly it will look like. And what we have is chaos and uncertainty. And in this respect, I can say that Corona, which is all around us, and all the measures which, come with it, it's our collective study case of how we deal with culture change. I think it's a collective culture shock we go through globally. And globally, we're in this very large liminal space where we don't know what's normal anymore. And we are questioning ourselves, what's the essential? We are questioning ourselves, where should we go? And if we don't know where we're from, we don't know where to go. So this is the time in liminal space where organizations have to rethink their mission. their why, their reason for being. And I think as a society as a whole, we need to rethink, okay, so what is valuable? What do we feel is really important in living together, in working together, in the services we have, in the products we have, in the schooling we have? And from there, we start shaping cultures. Because people shape cultures, cultures shape people. We can do it together. Now, important in this liminal space is how we look at time and the storyline. Because culture gives us this frame of good and bad. And sometimes people say it's like a collective fantasy we all started to believe. So we can choose a different story. And in liminal space, it feels like we're in a free fall. Because what we used to no longer is. It used to be a good sign to shake hands, and now it no longer is. So what does it mean? And in this liminal space, we can choose again. But it feels like we're falling. It feels like I'm in love, but I'm not sure if the other one loves me back. And in this period of time, the narrative is vital. Do we consider this time as a crisis? You know, we have to do some other stuff, and then we can go back to normal. Or do we consider this time as a transformation, where we're thrown back to the essentials and are invited to reinvent what's going on in your business? And that's what's happening in every culture change program. There's always a liminal space, especially when there's huge changes. And this liminal space, that's where it's happening. So you have the kickoff session. It's a separation. And then you go into transition, waiting for the integration to happen. It goes in 3 steps. And in this liminal space, this is where people feel there's chaos. There's not knowing where to go. That's where people say, is it ready yet? I want to go home. I'm tired. I don't feel like it. Who thought of this? Because that's where the power balances kick in. There's no culture change without a change in the power dynamics. People shape cultures. Cultures shape people. The ones who are really good at the culture behavioral norms within one organization, guess what? Those are the leaders. Of course, they're good at the game. And once you're a leader, you have influence on the things you feel are important. Now, if there's a culture shift, there might be a change in the type of behavior we want. And that might mean that the leadership needs to change their competences. People shape cultures through interaction and decision-making, so who will decide what? And that's what's going on in the liminal space. It's chaotic and it's creative at the same time. Some people hate it, some people love it. And in this moment of time, we need guidance. And I think each of us has the experience of a liminal space in your own life. I was ill for 1 year. I stayed at home, which is now 15 years ago. My body didn't function. And that's a liminal space. What was no longer was. I didn't know how long it would take. And at that moment, I needed 2 types of leadership. I needed someone to guide me through the ordinary life, the day-to-day business. You go eat, sleep, dress, everything like that. We need that. Like ordinary leadership, like the ordinary life. Things just continue. And then there was this other type of conversation I needed. The conversation it was about, but what does it all mean? Why me? How does it impact my life? What do I do? And that's what we call liminal leadership. In liminal spaces, people need 2 types of leadership. Ordinary leadership of the day-to-day business. You could say the role of the chief, the mayor. And we need this liminal leadership, which is more the role of a magician, of a voodoo priest, of someone who can reshape the storyline. Because people shape cultures, cultures shape people. We shape it through interaction. And there's 2 types of interaction. There's interaction which is more bullet point-like, transactional. That's the chief's business. You know, just make sure that it's efficient. But then there's this other part where we want to reshape and create a new storyline in which we can believe. And that's the department of the magicians. And you could say, well, magicians, hey, I'm running a business here. You know, we talk about competence and targets and KPIs. We don't have magicians, no. We call them consultants. We have oracles. You know, that's the trend watchers. We get to coaches, all people who help us redefine what we think is important. And those type of conversations I call them Campfire Conversations, because that's where we can reshape our world. That's the campfire where you sit down, and I'm sure you all know that. You sit down at a campfire, and you don't have a bullet point meeting at the campfire. You look in the flames and say, well, do you remember Grandma? Do you remember what happened? I have this dream where I want to go to. These are the moments where we make sense of the world. And that's where we know that culture gives us a frame of what is good and bad. It's organizing the world around us, but it also makes sense. It is a sense-making system. And when we want to go through culture change, we not only reorganize what was organized, but we reshape everything we believe in, what we feel is valuable. So if you have new corporate values, how do you make sure people truly believe in it? Through campfire conversations. And it needs this little bit of magic and 2 types of energy. And I'll go through that just briefly. You need power. You need power in the system, and dopamine. It's like a torch. You say, this is what we are. This is what we work for. This is our mission. And it's rebellious, because if anything is there which is blocking our mission, we'll break it. You know, it feels good, but if you only have power, it will burn you. It's burning energy. Therefore, you need to balance it with love. And love is not a word we tend to use in the business world. But love is where you put the torches together and you have this huge campfire. And you sit at the campfire. You don't have to fight for trust. The trust is there because you belong to this one tribe. And this is where we have oxytocin floating. And this is where I can be proud of you. Not because you tell me your strong stories. My pride grows when you tell me what your worries are. And that's where we can connect. So strong tribes, they know how to balance power and love. They know how to shape cultures, because through every decision, you shape and reshape the world around you. And then it does matter what you think, what you say, and what you do. Because people shape cultures, and cultures shape people. And if the world around you doesn't fit your needs and your goals anymore, you sit together at the campfire and you reshape your world. I wish you all the best and safe travels.
Dear Jitske, thank you so much for your inspiring talk. I just have one question, which I think is really important for all of us, since we're remote working since over a year. How can we make sure that we don't lose the spirit of our corporate culture?
I think what is vital, especially now that we have human leadership, connective leadership, and to me there's 2 dimensions. One is around remote working, and the other one is around digital working. So in the remote part, the good news is that nomadic tribes, they know how to work remote and live remote for ages. And what we can learn from those tribes is that they find ways that they create memories together. And memories are something where we have storylines and singing, and that the leader is very charismatic. So what we can learn from remote working is make sure that you create memories together, and those are not bullet point meetings. Those are the ones where you actually remember that you met. Now, that you can do live, but then we get to the second point, is that now we have to do that online and digital. So, and that's new. We don't have cultural etiquettes how to do that. We hardly know how to make connections online. And that's where we have to be creative and find new activities to create our online cultures. And that's a design question many times. So no, not automatically turn to Zoom or WebEx or MS Teams, but to rethink, why do we meet? What do we, what are the tasks and targets, and how do we design that? And that combine that with making memories, you get human leadership.
Vielen Dank. Du verstehst ja auch ein bisschen Deutsch,
Ja.
aber mit den Fragen habe ich dich verschont. Also vielen Dank für deine tollen Tipps, und es hat mich sehr gefreut, dich hier zu haben bei der NWX.
Dankeschön und bis zum nächsten Mal.
Absolut. Wir sehen uns nächstes Jahr ja bei der NWX auch wieder, ne?
Ja.
Sehr gut. Bis dahin.
Tschüss.